Senator Jack Johnson joins us this afternoon on the Matt Murphy Show. We always appreciate the good senator. Hey, Jack, how are you?
I'm great, Matt. Great to be back with you.
Well, it's good to have you. Before I get into some of the goings-on in Williamson County and Franklin, I want to ask you about this weekend's activities. How was the dinner? How was Ron DeSantis received?
He was received very, very well, very positively. His speech was spot on. I think the crowd, and certainly I would surmise that there were probably a lot of folks out there that are fully supporting former President Donald Trump for the Republican nomination. But I would tell you that Ron DeSantis acquitted himself quite well and delivered a very powerful speech. And I think that we will all be in agreement that whoever ends up being the nominee, we will be behind them next year.
Well, I don't have any doubt about that. I feel like a lot of people are making declarative assumptions or statements regarding the presidential race. I mean, I understand where Trump is polling-wise, but I also understand it's July of 2023. And
we're a year away from the convention, so there's a lot of time out there. You're right.
But that's the cycle we live in nowadays, I guess. It's, once one election is done, we're already gearing up for the next election. We've got a special session, it appears. I mean, every indicator is it's 100%. I think you feel the same way. What can you say about it, and what is your anticipation about what, if anything, we can get accomplished next month?
Well, you're right on, Matt. I think that there's no doubt we will be having a special session. The governor has made that very clear. He will be calling us in on August 21st. What will be accomplished during that special session is far less clear. And there are lots of conversations taking place about things that can be done relative to public safety, access to mental health, stiffening penalties for those who commit crimes with guns, maybe looking at additional ways we can secure facilities, including schools. We've touched on this before, but it's worth reiterating. When we have a special session, what we're going to accomplish is decided well in advance of that. We don't go into special session and sit around for several weeks pondering what we think might be good public policy. We do that when we're in regular session for 3 to 4 months out of the year when we convene in January. But every special session I've been a part of, it's decided in advance. Bills are drafted, they are circulated, stakeholders review those, there's feedback, and the actual session itself is somewhat of a formality. We go through the necessary process, constitutional process, to pass a law. So there are good people working on things that they believe will be helpful for good public policy, but we are nowhere near having something that we have all coalesced around that we know we will pass.
I kind of understood, because I had some background conversations, Jack, with the governor's office, and I'm certain that you've had multiple conversations with his office and Bill Lee himself regarding his thought process. And they were telling me that it is not their purpose to pass order of protection laws. It is not their purpose to pass red flag laws. And those are the two conversations that get the most attention, because a lot of Tennesseans like myself recognize that, one, red flag laws don't work, and two, they can be, if written improperly, very much in violation of our individual liberties and rights to gun ownership. That said, the governor seems to simply want to take the opportunity to have a very serious sit-down conversation, or maybe even brainstorming session about, is there anything we need to do that we can do without violating anyone's rights to protect Tennessee citizens, and particularly our young people, considering the aftermath of Covenant. That said, I don't know that we can't do that in regular session, Jack. I don't know why we necessarily have to spend the time and the money on a special. Is it because we want to address this issue maybe at the time that kids are getting back to school, do you feel?
I think that might be part of it. I think, and I don't speak for the governor, but what I would infer from comments he has made publicly and privately is that he does feel a sense of urgency around this particular subject matter. And I'd like to add one thing, because I think your assessment of his earlier proposed order protection bill, ERPO, as it's sometimes referred to, red flag law, is spot on. In my estimation, they have been found to be ineffective. I agree they can be used. And I will add a third thing. In the wake of the Bruen decision from the Supreme Court, Matt, I really do believe that it's constitutionally suspect, if not blatantly unconstitutional. So I do think it's important for my assessment is when I'm talking with my fellow members, there's very little support for any type of order of protection bill or red flag law. That doesn't mean, though, that there aren't things that we can contemplate relative to public safety, access to mental health, involuntary hospitalization for those who are in a mental health crisis, things of that nature. Those are all things that are worthy of conversation, but they are very complex. You have so many moving pieces and parts with some of these things. Getting that all bundled together in something that we can pass during a special session is going to be difficult. It's going to be very challenging. I'm not saying it can't be done, and there are people working very hard now to try to get us to that point. But we're just over a month away from that date that the governor has stipulated for the special session. So there's going to have to be a lot of work done. At a minimum, if we do go into special session and perhaps we contemplate some things, some proposals, and we don't feel like they're fully baked, fully ready to be passed, that doesn't mean we can't have some good productive conversations, come back, work through the fall towards the end of the year, and be prepared to take them up in January.
I believe that police, I want to shift gears. It's a related story, but I'm curious as the Senate Majority Leader, your thoughts on the response by Chief of Police John Drake to their decision not to pursue some of the money that has been laid out specifically for SROs in schools. Of course, the legislature and the governor have offered up, I think, $140 million. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, Jack, that would provide an SRO in every school in the state of Tennessee without the need for coming up with local funding. And I think it's a great effort on the part of the governor and the legislature. The city of Nashville, the metro government of Nashville, they have SROs in high schools and middle schools, but not in elementary schools. And the question's been laid on the table multiple times, why not, if it is not a monetary consideration? And now we're being told that they don't have enough police in order to do that functionally. Do you have any thoughts on this? Have you heard this? And what are your thoughts on it?
I have heard it, and I'm somewhat mystified that a city like Nashville or the Nashville School District would not avail themselves of the money that we have appropriated. And let me add, you're right, it's an enormous amount of money, and it is recurring. Oftentimes, government will allocate money on a one-time basis. We'll pay for it for 1 year, but then you're responsible for it after that. No, these are recurring funds that will pay for these school resource officers into perpetuity until a future General Assembly says, no, we're not going to pay that anymore. So it's incredibly important, I think, to have these school resource officers in these schools, not just to provide security and safety. And full transparency, I really enjoyed your interview with Freddie O'Connell. Mm-hmm. And you asked him about this, and I was, flummoxed a bit by his answer. It's important that these kids get to know police officers and their value. School resource officers certainly provide a degree of security, but they do so much more. They bond with these kids. All three of my kids went through Williamson County Public Schools and had a school resource officer from kindergarten all the way through their senior year in high school. And they loved their SROs. They had a wonderful relationship with them. It was a really positive experience. So I hope that the Nashville Metro School Board will reconsider the administration there and take us up on this to provide these school resource officers in the schools. And I hope that the parents will step up and pressure the officials in Nashville to avail themselves of this money we've made available.
Well, and you're right on target in the conversation with Freddie O'Connell, and you can listen to that conversation via podcast, 997WTN.com. We talked about this, and O'Connell, and I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, he seemed to accept the concept that some youngsters in elementary school saw police officers as a negative. And my thought was, well, my goodness, if that's the case, then as a mayoral candidate, you need to lay out ways that we correct that. If that's happening in our elementary schools, where young people think of police officers as the bad guy and not the good guy, then we need to correct that instead of accepting it and putting our children potentially in harm's way because of it.
I agree wholeheartedly. And when you talk to these SROs, and I've talked to a number of sheriffs, typically the sheriff's department will oversee the SRO program. And I've talked with numerous sheriffs, including my sheriff in Williamson County, and he will tell you, and other sheriffs will tell you as well, the value that these SROs provide in these schools. They get to know the kids. They know the kids' who are struggling with something, potentially having issues, and because of the relationships there, can make sure that the parents are aware and they get them the help that they need. It's just a really, really valuable tool for these schools. So, again, I'm hoping that they will reconsider and take us up on the offer to pay for those. And I get it. There is a hiring issue and there's a capacity issue in there. We are trying to appropriate enough money to make sure that these positions are well paid, and maybe it can't happen overnight, but I believe that the recruitment can take place and get these people on staff to get into these schools.
Jack, in the few minutes that we have left, latest developments on the awful, evil details of this so-called soccer coach, 20 years, illegal alien. We now understand that he was arrested on a couple of occasions. It's my understanding it was 2005, and there's some other – I mean, what do you know about this, and how in the world that can someone get away with being an illegal alien and still get arrested in this state? I don't understand. Is there no ability for local authorities to route him back to ICE if ICE won't accept him?
Well, this is something that our local law enforcement struggles with almost on a daily basis relative to people who are in the country illegally. And certainly monsters like this particular soccer coach that have perpetrated such heinous evil on these poor kids that were his victims. But yes, what happens, law enforcement, if there's some type of an arrest and they apprehend someone who's in the country illegally, they make that determination, they contact ICE, and in a perfect world, the way the system is supposed to work, ICE comes, picks that person up, and deports them, gets them out of the country. We know that is not happening, and that's why we have tens of millions of people that are in the country illegally. There's so many facets to this horrible, horrible case. Number one, the evil perpetrated on these kids, and I hope that he rots under the jail for the rest of his life. Innocent until proven guilty, but if he is found to be guilty of what he has been accused of, then he deserves the worst possible punishment the law can provide. But it also dovetails into this whole conversation we're having about the border, the southern border. We know that President Trump had made tremendous progress, even though many presidents have talked about it. President Trump had made so much progress in securing that border, maybe not 100%, but certainly more so than it ever has been in recent decades. And President Biden has undone that. So, Matt, the thing we have to contemplate is we have people coming across the border every single day who could be capable of the same type of crime. And if we would just secure that border, these people would not be allowed into the country. Well
spoken, Jack. Always good to get your perspective on these matters. And you're always good to the listening audience offering your opinion. Thank you so much. Take care, and we'll talk to you again next time.
Great. Thanks, Matt.